Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today's video is the MSI GE66 Raider, and I answer if this configuration is good value for the money and how well does it compare to other notebooks in its class. Watch to find out. Let's roll. Alright, so let's go over the specs of this notebook. Looking under the hood, we have an i7-10875H, that's 8-core 16 threads, boosting up to 5.1 gigahertz. So the screen itself is a 240 hertz panel, 3 millisecond response time, up to 100% of the sRGB, which is nice to see. It also features 16 gigs of memory, dual channel in 3200 megahertz, one actually the fastest megahertz rate from this model. Features a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD, a 2070 that can use up to 115 watts, killer wireless, killer Ethernet, and then all of that packed into 5.25 pounds. Now, the feature of the day on this notebook is the fact the battery is 99.9 watt hour. That is the legal limit that they can put inside a laptop and still carry on an airline. So that's pretty cool. So the unit itself actually is an all aluminum deck and lid, which is quite nice, and it's actually one of more of the premium ones in its class, being that it has a full aluminum. A lot of the other ones, like the Asus G series, actually is all plastic all the way around, but I find that this one is very cool to the touch, very nice, gets a little bit of cooling properties throughout the unit. Now, the bottom of the unit is plastic, so there is that, but at the end of the day, you're not really touching that all that often, so not a really big deal. So they did put a heat pipe system in this. There's 6 heat pipes. They feature a wider design than normal and also have larger fans. There's vents on both sides, on the left and the right, and also it has of course the exhaust out the back. Now all vents are actually exhaust ports, and it can really move the air, making sure that it stays fairly cool when it needs to. So I did try undervolting the CPU. I was able to get it down from its stock settings down to negative 0.08 volts. Now, that's not a huge amount, and I did actually find that I was still getting thermal lock. So it was still, even at that undervolting, still maxing out the CPU. That might mean that you may need to do a repaste of the CPU and GPU to get better performance. However, that being said, it was still actually able to outperform the Razer Blade 15, which has the same processor. And I'll show you a quick snip of the benchmarks there. So still very impressive. It was able to post a score of 3874, which is pretty impressive for this setup. Now, it does have a leaf blower mode. So at any point, there's a hotkey, which is a function F8. We can really start to move the air in the unit. It is fairly loud though. This actually gets us to 60 decibels, just over 60 decibels when operating at this level. Now, I wouldn't suggest you use this any kind of regular use. In fact, most of the benchmarking I did do, it actually didn't see that much gains in terms of thermal performance, and no additional gains as it related to frames per second. So there's also a balance mode, which gives you best performance for the noise levels. And then there's also an extreme mode where you can disable the cool boost, and that still sits in around 55 decibels. But typically, I really like to be able to operate a notebook in as quiet as possible. So they have something called silent mode, and I found myself mostly defaulting to that, just simply that it gave the best thermals, but also decent frame rates for that setting. So the keyboard does feature per key RGB. It's SteelSeries. It is an okay keyboard at the end of the day. The keyboard is quiet. Like, I find that it's probably one of the quieter notebooks that I've tested, and I found that it is fairly compact design. So it's nice. You got the key row on the side, home, page up, page down, and I'd say that the key travel though is a bit shallow for me. And so what I found is that it's a bit soft and squishy. It just wasn't great. And to be fair, I was coming off of Alienware's M15, and that keyboard is by far one of the best keyboards I've used thus far. But compared to this one, it just feels a little squishy. But at the end of the day, when I look at all the ones that are in its class, it's still relatively decent. The one thing that I have to say about this is that the keyboard does stay very cool. Typically in most notebooks you do get a hot spot, but I would say that at the end of the day it is okay. You can also adjust, of course, all the lighting, so you can adjust it any way you want. You do have to do that in a separate app. So you do have to change any of the RGB settings as well as the Aurora light bar on the front within the SteelSeries app. MSI does have their Dragon Center, and that doesn't actually link back to the RGB. So it's a separate app, which is a little bit of a minor annoyance more than anything, but something good to note nonetheless. Now, talking about the Dragon Center itself, you'll find most of the settings there. You can adjust the thermal profiles, the color settings. To be honest though, I did just keep everything on sRGB. Now, there is one thing that this does do, which is called gaming mode, and that will actually set the specific colors as well as the color profile for different games. So if you don't want that, just be aware of it, because you may want to disable it for some of your game profiles. So the screen is really nice at the end of the day. Like I said, 240 hertz, 3 millisecond response, 100% of the sRGB, and you get really good color across the screen. Never had any issues. Now, in terms of screen bleed, well, there's actually none, believe it or not. This is actually the first notebook that I've tested where it doesn't have any screen bleed. I actually couldn't believe it. And so, of course, you know, there's nothing on it. And this is actually the first notebook that I've tested where there hasn't been any screen bleed. You get the IPS glow that you can see, but in terms of any kind of light bleed around the edges, it's perfect. And of course, you know, panels can vary, so yours might actually have screen bleed, but at the end of the day, this is the one that I got, which was, like I said, perfect. MSI really ultimately came through with a great panel on this one. All right, so how is the web camera? Well, the web camera featured in this unit is a 1080p camera. Now, it doesn't have Windows Hello, which is unfortunate, as that would be really nice, but the fact that it has a 1080p screen, the camera is sharp, it looks great, it's not blurry. Still wish there was a 4K option, but for everything you need it to do, at the end of the day, this is a great camera. In terms of audio, the audio on this is not awesome. It's good music still, but you know, in terms of the audio, I found it was very tinny compared to other notebooks that I've been testing. And I was on a Zoom meeting earlier this week, and I found that the sound just wasn't loud enough. In games it was okay, but you know, I wouldn't suggest that you could really use this as your everyday. I'd suggest headphones or external speakers. So in terms of the battery, now this is the largest battery that I've ever tested in a notebook. Now that being said, in PCMark's battery test, it just got over 2 hours, which was pretty underwhelming. Honestly, I expected way more. You know, being that it's the legal limit, you know, I was expecting at least 5 to 6 hours, and that certainly wasn't the case. So there is a feature in the MSI Dragon Center, which is called Super Battery. And so what it's designed to do is really to maximize the battery life. Now, I did find that it really declocks the system way, way, way down. Like, I mean way down. On Cinebench, and it actually only got a result of 701 points. That's basically a processor from 5 to 6 years ago. Now, it is still usable. You can still do light tasks, word processing, things like that, but you definitely notice the snappiness is all gone. So you do get a little bit more longevity out of there. I was able to get about 4 hours. I did have the brightness quite high, so you probably could stretch this out a little bit longer. Now, that being said, the Razer Blade 15 did a much better job here with less watt hour in terms of its battery capacity. And that was getting well over 3 hours. So if battery is a key buying decision, then you may want to to look at either selecting the mode while you're off wall power, or maybe looking at a different notebook altogether. So in terms of the noise levels, quiet came in around 33 decibels. It really is inaudible. The fans are still spinning, but it's very, very quiet. Balance mode gets you up to about 45 decibels. Performance, 54 decibels. And then at full speed, that's about 59 to 63 decibels, which is really loud at the end of the day. All right, so let's get to the benchmarks. All right, so first up we have PCMark. It came in at a score of 6316, which was right in the middle of the pack. Moving over to Cinebench R20, this we could see that at the top of the spectrum we had 3874 Extreme, Undervolt, and then all the way down to 701 when it was in super battery mode. So Call of Duty Modern Warfare max settings, ray tracing on. This came in at 69.1. Now I do a very consistent bench run on this. This is Fog of War. This was the result. I went and made sure drivers were set. Everything was consistent, but it was actually the lowest score in the bunch. The good news is it's not the lowest score for everything. So now moving over to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, highest settings, the Raider came in at 94 frames per second under the extreme setting, which was right in the middle of the pack. In fact, the fact that it was really so close to the 2070 Supers was really impressive here. Now heading over to 3D Mark. Now under Time Spy, we saw a score of 7907, and in Firestrike Extreme, 4571. Now this, I do have to say, this is the best out of everything in its class, so it really was able to put the power down here. Moving over to Anno 1800, so the Raider came in at 9149 frames per second, which is quite good being that it's a CPU intensive game and it was able to hold its own across the board. Now moving over to Metro Exodus, so all settings at 1080p. Again, you can see that it's really at the middle of the pack, really at that kind of same level as the 2070 Supers. Now, one thing moving into the actual different settings, what I wanted to actually show is how it fared against, say, a 2060 and a 2070 from the G15. And you can actually see that it bested the score across the board. So it actually really did perform well in this bench. So moving over to Death Stranding, 1080p max settings, DLSS on. This came in at 86 frames per second. Overall looked really good in the game and was able to perform quite well. Heading over to Forza Horizon 4, all ultra settings, this posted 121 frames per second. And then moving over to Flight Simulator. Now this is a great game, lots of fun. All ultra settings, because why would you want to play it any other way? And of course this one came in at 44.9 under extreme performance, 43.3 under balanced, and under silent 39.7. Now I did use the bench I did use is around the landing segment, so it's a landing activity, very easy to rinse and repeat that one for benchmarking, and you can see the consistency here. Now considering that the Alienware M15 with a 2080 Super in it was only getting 52 frames per second, this was quite good. Fortnite came in at 118 frames per second on balanced and 105 under the silent mode. Now heading over to Apex Legends, max settings, extreme performance is 134 frames per second, and then going all the way down to around 130 frames per second under silent mode. And then looking at Red Dead Redemption 2, so all ultra settings, 1080p. You can see here there's the balance mode and silent mode. The reason why you don't see extreme is actually because balance and extreme was almost identical. And so this posted a score of 56 frames per second, but you can actually see the sound levels. So you'll lose 1 frame per second and you can actually have something near silent, 39 decibels. That's quite good. And you can actually see the temperatures were very consistent on both the CPU and GPU at 86. Heading back to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, this is going through all the different profiles from silent, balanced, extreme, and extreme with the cooler boost enabled. You can see the scores across the board here, but at the end of the day, you can see how much performance you actually get, which is 89 at the silent level to at the highest extreme level at 95 frames. So you basically just get 6 frames per second. That's the delta between the two modes, but you can see from a sound standpoint, 41 all the way up to 60. But in terms of the temperatures at CPU and GPU, very consistent at 86 in silent, and then moving kind of through the different ranks there. So overall, from a gaming standpoint, I'm quite impressed. I'm really happy with the performance in silent mode as well as the temps. It actually kept it very consistent across the different games. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about a notebook. I want something that's quiet, you're still able to game on it. To me, silent mode really proves out the thermals within a unit. If there's not much of a swing in terms of frames per second, to me is a really good indicator that it's able to perform quite well at those settings. So now moving to the exterior, I've actually found that it's pretty fingerprint resistant. You can see a couple smudges kind of coming through, but overall, this is really impressive. I haven't really had to clean it. You know, just a light wipe with a hand, and it's really held up quite well on this unit. The other thing that I want to point out is the trackpad. So the trackpad itself, you did get some clicking in the corners that was fairly a lot of travel. I actually didn't find it that bad in terms of use, so that might not bother you. And then in terms of the palm rest, felt very cool all the way through. So again, that nice aluminum finish on the deck really helps kind of pull the heat away, and it didn't retain the heat within the palm rests themselves. The other thing I want to note is the hinge. You know, this hinge is quite good. Not only does it give you the one hand open with ease, but the overall, the flex, this is a really solid design. I'm actually very impressed with what MSI has done here. Overall, in terms of the hinge, it's quite good and very minimal wobble. So final thoughts on the MSI GE66 Raider. Well, I have to say MSI has done a decent job. They've really packaged the componentry and the mix quite well. In fact, I would say this is one of the best in its class overall. However, for the money, you can get more componentry, such as a 2070 Super, for less money, and by actually a pretty large margin. We're talking about $300 to $500. Now, the compelling reason why I would buy a unit like this was really for the battery. That was one key feature that I thought would really shine in a notebook like this. And it does perform quite well when you put it into the super battery mode. When it's left to its default settings, it really didn't perform any better than any of the other notebooks in its class. So that really is unfortunate. That being said, overall, this is quite a good unit. I am very happy. I love the Aurora that they call it in the front. This is one of the most unique aspects of the notebook itself, and I think it looks stunning. So based on this and the other aspects that I've showcased throughout the review, I'd give this an IMO score of 7.5 out of 10. I think they've done a decent job, but just a couple things that took the score down. The fact that the battery wasn't able to be capable, the keyboard squishiness, the trackpad, just some small aspects overall. Pretty happy with the unit. I think the fact that you can get a laptop screen without any screen bleed is impressive. Well, that's it for me, guys. I hope you really liked the video today, and please like and subscribe to the channel. I did get a new mic set up. I hope it's coming nice and clear and loud for you guys without the echo. I really love to hear from you, and so leave a comment down below, and until next time, bye for now.